The phone rang at 5:03 a.m. Margaret Holmes sat straight up in bed, heart pounding. At 68, she hadn't worked a shift in over 5 years. But once a nurse, always a nurse. Her body still knew when a call meant something was wrong. She reached for the phone with steady hands. But her voice was tight. "This is Margaret." The voice on the other end was professional, but laced with something she recognized too well, carefully restrained sympathy. "Mrs. Holmes. This is Dr. Reyes from Wake County Medical Center. I'm very sorry to inform you." She didn't need to hear the rest. Her breath caught in her chest. The stillness on the other end of the line. The way the doctor paused between each sentence, she had delivered this kind of news herself too many times to not recognize the rhythm of grief. "Your husband, James Holmes, was brought in around 2:50 a.m. after suffering a major heart attack. He didn't make it. We did everything we could." Margaret didn't cry. Not yet. She thanked the doctor. Asked 2 or 3 practical questions. What time should she come? Where could she pick up his things, and hung up. She stared at the other half of the bed. James never woke up this early. On weekends, he loved to sleep in while she brewed the coffee. The only thing that ever got him out of bed before 7 was the smell of her cinnamon rolls or the promise of fishing with his old friends. Last night, he'd gone out to Lake Kittrell with Carl and Bill. Just like always. Now the other half of the bed would stay cold. Permanently. Margaret moved on instinct. She pulled on her robe, went to the kitchen, and started the kettle. The simple routine: water, gas. Heat helped her keep her hands moving. And her mind from falling apart? James had complained of chest tightness a few times over the summer. She told him to get it checked. He joked it was just the spicy ribs from Carl's BBQ. "It's not your damn ribs, James," she'd said. "You're yetmiş iki. Go get a scan." He had just grinned. "Madji. I'm old. Not dying. Don't start planning my funeral yet." Now those words echoed in her head, sharp and bitter. The kettle whistled. She poured a strong cup of tea and sat down at the kitchen table. She looked at the time, 5:38. Lauren would be up. She always rose early to grade her students' papers. But Brian probably hadn't even gone to bed yet. He and Vanessa were night owls. Always some dinner party, client call, or trip to plan. Margaret took a breath and reached for the phone again. First, Lauren. Then Brian. She wasn't ready to deal with what would come next. But she had no choice. James was gone. And now, everything would change. Margaret dialed her daughter's number first. Mom Lauren answered almost instantly. "Is everything okay? James passed away early this morning," Margaret said, her voice steadier than she expected. "Heart attack. He was at the lake with Carl and Bill. They got him to the hospital. But it was too late." There was a long pause. Then a soft, broken gasp. "Oh. Mom. I'm so sorry. Are you okay? I'm managing," Margaret replied, eyes fixed on the steam rising from her tea. "There's a lot to take care of. Can you come today?" "Of course," Lauren said. "We'll leave within the hour. Rob will drive. Aiden and Clara are already up. We'll be there by late morning." Margaret nodded, though her daughter couldn't see her. "Thank you, sweetheart." She ended the call and took another sip of tea, bracing herself. Then she dialed Brian. The phone rang once, twice, 6 times. Just as she was about to hang up, he finally answered. "Hey, Mom. Is everything all right? It's barely 6. Your father died last night." Brian. Silence. What? What happened? Margaret repeated the words she had just told Lauren. Her voice was even calm, almost detached. She had trained herself over decades of nursing not to break during the first wave. That came later. Brian didn't speak for a while. Then he cleared his throat. When's the funeral? Monday afternoon. 2 o'clock. Another pause. Monday, Mom. It's Vanessa's birthday. We've been planning this party for months. I don't think we can cancel everything now. Margaret didn't move. Didn't blink. What did you just say? It's not just a party. Brian said quickly. We've rented a rooftop space in Raleigh. 50 guests. Deposits. Catering. It's a lot. You want me to move your father's funeral for a birthday party. It's not just a party. Mom, it's important. For Vanessa. For us? I'm just asking if we can do Tuesday instead. Margaret set the cup down slowly. Deliberately. To keep from spilling the tea. Your father who raised you. Who paid for your college. Who helped you buy your first home is dead. And you're asking me to delay his funeral because of a catered dinner and cocktails. That's not fair. Brian said. You know how much planning we've put into this. She closed her eyes and saw him as a boy, red-cheeked and grinning, holding up a fish the size of his forearm, with James behind him, beaming with pride. He's gone. Brian. And I'm burying him without his son. It's Vanessa's birthday. He repeated, almost like a defense. I heard you the first time. She said quietly. Give her my best. And she hung up. Her hands weren't shaking from grief this time, but from something colder. Something sharper. Disappointment. Khi bạn sẵn sàng, mình sẽ tiếp tục viết phần 3. Nếu bạn muốn thay đổi cách diễn đạt, thêm chiều sâu cảm xúc, hoặc một đoạn hội thoại mạnh mẽ hơn, mình luôn sẵn sàng hỗ trợ. You said zu va va, ocoo fa, ocn, ba cua, da si evo, chi tiết chớ trên 2VATO cho tôi với UI 600 chat GPT said. Dưới đây là bản tiếng Anh kể chuyện theo phong cách Mỹ. Viết dựa trên phần 3 của dàn ý. Độ dài khoảng 600 từ. Tiếp nối mạch cảm xúc và nội tâm nhân vật. Margaret stood at the window, watching as morning broke over Oak Ridge. The sun was climbing steadily over the rooftops, casting a soft gold over the quiet neighborhood. The street looked exactly the same as it had for the last 30 years. Only now, everything felt different. The house was too quiet. James's slippers still sat by the bedroom door. His reading glasses rested on the kitchen counter where he had last left them. His flannel shirt, his favorite one, the navy blue with missing buttons, still hung over the chair in the living room. She couldn't bring herself to move any of it. Their home had been modest, single-story. Red brick. A small front yard that James always kept immaculate. They'd bought it when Lauren was 7 and Brian was just 3. It took them 15 years to pay off the mortgage. Every holiday, every scraped knee, every birthday party happened within these walls. James had once built a treehouse in the back corner of the yard, hammering each board with care. Lauren had adored it. She'd read books up there for hours. Brian, too, when he was little. But by the time he was a teenager, he dismissed it as kid stuff and hardly went outside at all. They had thought about selling the house when the kids left for college, downsizing. But James said no. We need a place for them to come home to. He'd insisted. He had dreamed of grandchildren filling the rooms, of big Sunday dinners, noisy Thanksgivings, the whole family laughing at the same table. Lauren gave them that 2 beautiful kids, Aiden and Clara. They came often. James taught Aiden how to sand wood in the garage, let Clara crawl into his lap for stories. But Brian became more and more distant. After he met Vanessa, the visits stopped almost entirely. Margaret remembered the first time they met Vanessa. Perfect blonde hair, tailored blazer, a confidence that felt like a wall. She had smiled. Sure, but later, Margaret overheard her on the phone, whispering, "His mom's sweet, but honestly, she's just basic. She's been a nurse her whole life. His dad's a mechanic. They've never even been to Europe." James had laughed it off. "She's young. Muriel. She'll come around." But she didn't. And over time, Brian began to echo her dismissiveness. The phone calls got shorter. Birthdays were forgotten. Christmas cards stopped coming. Still, James defended him. "He's our boy," he'd say. "Give him time. He'll come back around." Margaret wasn't so sure. But for James's sake, she held on to the hope. Now James was gone, and their son couldn't be bothered to show up for the funeral. Margaret sat in James's worn recliner, the one he never let anyone else touch, and let her fingers trail across the faded leather. She had lost her husband. But somewhere along the way, she had also lost her son. And the hardest part of all, she wasn't sure which grief cut deeper. 2 days later, Brian Holmes stood at the edge of his driveway in Raleigh, flipping through the mail with one hand and balancing an iced coffee in the other. Bills, a real estate flyer, a coupon for dry cleaning, and then a white envelope. Heavy. No return address on the front. But the seal in the top corner said everything Holloway and Finch, attorneys at law. He tore it open right there, standing in the afternoon sun. At first, the words blurred too many legal terms. Then one sentence snapped him to attention. "Mr. Holmes, this letter serves as formal notice that your mother, Mrs. Margaret Holmes, has amended her last will and testament. Effective immediately." Brian's eyes darted through the page. "The family cabin at Lake Lure is to be transferred solely to your sister, Lauren Prescott, and her children. You, Brian Holmes, will receive the statutory minimum share of the estate as required by North Carolina law, as well as select personal effects of your late father, James Holmes." He read it again. And again. His mouth went dry. The cabin. He had already counted on it. Not emotionally, but financially. It was the asset. The backup plan. The escape route from the avalanche of debt he'd been building. The cabin was worth at least $450. Zero, maybe more if he sold to the right investor. And now gone. Taken from him because of a single missed event. No, not just any event. His father's funeral. He crushed the letter in his hand and stormed into the house. Vanessa wasn't home yet. Thank God. She had no idea about the loans, the secret credit card, the sketchy investment deal he'd made last fall. She definitely didn't know about his plan to sell the cabin to cover it all. This was bad. Really bad. He pulled out his phone and called Margaret. No answer. Straight to voicemail. He called again. And again. Still nothing. Pacing the living room, he dialed Lauren. She picked up on the third ring. Her voice was calm. Too calm. "Brian, you knew about this. Didn't you? I did? And you didn't think to tell me that Mom was cutting me out of the will. She's not cutting you out." Lauren said carefully. "She's making decisions. Based on your actions." "Oh. Come on," he snapped. "I missed one funeral." "You missed his funeral," she interrupted. "Our father's funeral. And that's not the only thing you've missed. Birthdays. Holidays. Every opportunity to show up for this family. You've chosen something else? He was silent for a beat. You don't need the cabin. You live in Charlotte. You're not even up there. No, Lauren said. But I remember what it meant to him. I remember Dad waking us up before sunrise to fish off the dock. I remember how he wanted to teach Aiden to cast a line there. You remember what you want, Brian? But you forget what matters. He hung up. And for the first time in years, Brian Holmes felt like a man standing on the edge of a cliff looking down. And realizing the ground had already crumbled underneath him, the drive back to Oak Ridge felt longer than Brian remembered. Maybe it was the weight in his chest. Maybe it was the silence in the car, no music. No. Vanessa beside him, filling the air with plans and opinions. She hadn't spoken much since he told her about the will. She'd packed a bag that night and left for her parents' house in Durham. I need time, she had said. And you need to figure out who you are without the lies. Now he was pulling up to the house where he grew up, staring at the front porch with its chipped paint and wind chimes that never stopped clinking. The door opened before he could knock. Margaret stood in the doorway, cardigan draped around her shoulders. She looked older than he remembered, thinner. More tired, but her eyes were clear. Steady. You're early, she said. Brian nodded. Didn't sleep much. Come in. He followed her into the kitchen. The same kitchen table. The same worn counter. The same scent of lemon polish and old coffee grounds. Margaret poured him a cup of tea without asking if he wanted one. It was what she did, what she had always done. The kind of quiet caretaking you didn't notice until it stopped. He took a sip, burned his tongue, set the cup down. Why'd you do it? He asked finally. You know why? I thought we were past this. I called. I tried to explain. You explained, she said evenly. You explained that your wife's birthday party was more important than saying goodbye to your father. That was your choice. This, she tapped her fingers on the table, is mine. It's just a cabin, he said, not even believing himself. No, Brian, it's not. She leaned back, her hands folded in her lap. That place was where your father taught you how to bait a hook, where he let you take the canoe out alone for the first time, where you scraped your knees and came running to me crying. And he told you to rub some dirt in it and then carried you inside anyway. He didn't respond. Couldn't. I'm not trying to punish you, she said. I'm trying to protect what your father valued. And right now, that's Lauren. And Aiden. And Clara. They still show up. They still care. Brian looked down at his hands. I didn't mean to let you both down. I believe that, Margaret said softly. But intention doesn't erase impact. You were gone, Brian, for years. And now you want everything to go back the way it was. No, he said quietly. I want to fix it. I don't know how, but I want to try. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. I'm not changing the will. He nodded back. I figured. But I'll help. Some of your debts. Not all. And only under one condition: therapy. A real one. For gambling. For money problems. Whatever this is. You commit to that. I'll commit to helping you start over. For the first time in weeks. He felt something loosen in his chest. Okay, he said. I'll do it. And the car, she added. What car? The Mustang. Your father's project. He wanted you to finish it with Aiden one day. Maybe it's time. Brian looked up. You'd trust me with that. She gave a tired smile. I'm trusting you with a second chance. Don't make me regret it. Saturday morning, came with the smell of damp earth and freshly cut grass. The sky was soft, gray, quiet, but not sad. Just still. Brian pulled into the driveway of his childhood home and parked behind Lauren's SUV. He could see Aiden crouched by the garage, examining a tool set. The boy looked up, cautious at first, then gave a small wave. Brian waved back. He hadn't seen his nephew in almost a year. Margaret met him on the porch, arms crossed loosely. "He's been waiting for you since 7. "I'm here," Brian said. "I brought breakfast donuts. From Hillman's." "That's a start." She stepped aside to let him in. They didn't hug. Not yet. But something had shifted. The silence wasn't cold anymore. It was space. Space to begin again. In the garage, the old '67 Mustang sat beneath a canvas cover. James's pride and joy. The project he never finished. Aiden stood next to it, eyes wide. "You ready to learn?" Brian asked. The boy nodded. "Grandma says you and Grandpa used to work on it together." "We did. Long time ago." "You ever hold a ratchet before?" "No. But I watched a video on YouTube." Brian laughed a real laugh. "The first in weeks." "Well, that's something." They started slowly, removing bolts, labeling wires, teaching Aiden how to recognize corrosion, how to feel when something's loose but not broken. The hours passed quietly, with soft conversation and the occasional clang of metal. Margaret watched from the kitchen window, sipping coffee. She saw James in both of them, Brian's brow furrowed in focus, Aiden's curiosity bouncing between caution and wonder. It wasn't everything, but it was something. That afternoon, as they packed up the tools, Aiden tugged on Brian's sleeve. "Uncle Brian, do you think Grandpa would be proud of us?" Brian swallowed. "I hope so. He said we'd go on a road trip when it's fixed." "You?" "Me." "And him?" Brian looked over at the car. Half assembled. Greasy fingerprints on the hood. "Maybe we still can," he said. "Just the two of us? I think he'd like that." Inside, Margaret placed a heart-shaped stone on the windowsill. Clara had found it in the garden that morning and declared it a message from heaven. It sat next to James's reading glasses and his old fishing hat tokens of a man who had loved deeply and quietly. The will would not change. The cabin would go to Lauren. Brian's share would remain as decided. But something more important had shifted. The restoration wasn't just about the car. It was about rebuilding trust, turning regret into responsibility, and rediscovering what it meant to show up. Not for what you could get, but for who you could be. As the sun dipped behind the trees, Brian stood in the garage doorway, wiping his hands on an old towel. Margaret stepped beside him, both looking out into the evening light. "You coming back next Saturday?" she asked. "Yeah," he said, without hesitation. "I'll be here." And for the first time in a long time, she believed him.